Hello. Today I'm going to be speaking about two films, Romeo and Juliet, which was made in 1996 by Baz Luhrmann, and Skyfall, made in 2012 by Sam Mendes. Both of these films were made for different reasons. Romeo and Juliet was used to mark the end of the 1900s and introduce the audience into a new millennium. On the other hand, Skyfall was made in a year where a lot of films were made about death and fighting. Some other films in this genre were The Hunger Games, The Avengers, and Prometheus, which all featured death, fighting, and destruction. This was because a lot of people firmly believed that the world was going to end in 2012. In an interview, I asked why they thought Baz Luhrmann made a tragedy film just before the end of a millennium, and if they thought the director had an aim for making this film at the end of the millennium. The response I had was, I don't think so. I think it was just coincidental. They would have done the production beforehand, setbacks could have made the film come out later. It was just bad timing. However, a quote from Brian Eno says it's not highly stylized, but it's not randomly stylized either. This shows that the quote disagrees with the person who I was interviewing because she says that it was random that Romeo and Juliet was at the end of the 1900s. Brian Eno states that it is not random, which shows that it happened for a reason, and I believe it's because Baz Luhrmann wanted to end the era with a tragedy, which is one of Shakespeare's greatest plays. However, these two films are linked together by themes. The two I am going to speak about are class and gender. The first theme I am going to speak about is class. Skyfall is not very clear in how class is shown, but there are a few scenes in this film that shows Bond and M to be richer than Silver. The first scene I looked at for class in Skyfall is an extreme long shot of Bond sat in an old abandoned warehouse with him wearing a fine, expensive black suit. The suit reflects how Bond lives his life. His life is comfortable and he is able to spend the money on expensive clothes. Similarly, Silver's clothes reflect how he works, as he is wearing a cheap-looking beige and brown suit, which matches the colours of the old abandoned warehouse. These colours show that he is poor and he cannot afford the luxuries that Bond is able to buy. The next scene that I looked at in Skyfall was a conversation between M and Silver. M is wearing a black suit similar to Bond's that shows she has money, power, and she is the one in charge of the scene. Silver, on the other hand, is wearing a prison suit in a beige colour similar to the one he was wearing in the previous scene. This shows the same mise-en-scène comparison between Silver and M as it does between Silver and Bond, as the same colour scheme is used through the character's clothing. Next, I looked at Romeo and Juliet and how Baz Luhrmann portrayed class in his film. The first scene I looked at was in the very beginning when both families, the Montagues and the Capulets, were first introduced. In editing, they used a wipe to introduce the Montagues, which is a lot more fun and playful than the slow jump cuts that introduce the Capulets. The clothing, which both families wear, is also very important to indicate who is richer. Montagues wear brightly coloured, unbuttoned Hawaiian shirts, which makes them seem carefree and they don't have to impress anyone, unlike the Capulets who wear black, expensive leather clothing. The two families' relationship with God is also important. Juliet's cousin wears a waistcoat with an embroidered image of Jesus on. This shows that the rich are closer to God than the poor. However, they are tied to God and are not free from the religion. In the 1990s, there was a large decrease in religion in America, as many people's lives would have changed and would have been too busy to listen to religion. Religion often symbolises order and discipline, but in Romeo and Juliet's case, it creates the opposite. Juliet has a shrine of angels in her bedroom, which she uses to pray that Romeo is safe and ask for guidance. This shows that only the rich are able to worship God, as the poor are not worthy of it. Also, the two main characters' entrances are different because their class is completely different to each other. Juliet's entrance is grand, but it is rushed as she has to attend functions and engagements that her parents put on. Juliet is shown as calm and composed as she lies in the bath, compared to her mother who is running around and organising the evening's events. Romeo's entrance isn't as grand as Juliet's entrance, which shows that because Juliet is richer than Romeo, she demands a grander introduction to the film. The beach scene for Romeo is a lot more calmer than Juliet, which supports the fact that Romeo's family are a lot more laid back and relaxed compared to Juliet's family. Henderson says that the two entrances are cinematic self-parodies, which suggests that the way both of the families live is a joke, and it is not the way normal people live. Next, I looked at gender in both Skyfall and Romeo and Juliet. I created a focus group for a clip from Skyfall, where Em and Silver were reunited. I wanted to see if the focus group could see if Em was higher than Silver because of her gender or not, even though she is head of MI6, so I decided to ask a few questions about this clip. One of the questions I asked was if they thought that Em is still controlled by men. This was one of the responses. I do not think Em is controlled by men. However, male dominance does get stronger within the film. For example, Eve Moneypenny is demoted, Em gets killed, and so does Severine. The person who takes over Em's job happens to be a male, so it goes back to the same structure as it was within a 1980s Bond film. I looked at Stuart Hall's preferred, oppositional, and negotiated readings and applied them to Skyfall. The preferred reading for Em to lose her job over a mistake would have the audience agreeing that she should have been fired. However, an oppositional reading of this would have the audience disagreeing with the film, and that she should keep her job as she is the boss, and having Bond fired for all the problems he has caused. On the other hand, a negotiated reading could be similar to the oppositional reading, but they might disagree on Bond being fired from MI6 because it is a Bond film. My final question for the focus group was if they thought that Silver continues to oppress and manipulate Em in this scene. One response said, "Definitely. This can be strongly seen when he shows her the effects that hydrogen cyanide can create. We also get a slight low angle of Silver to enhance his dominance." This is true because low angles are mostly used to show dominance and power, which shows that even though Silver is a prisoner in a glass case, he is still above her. The slight high angle shots on Em, even though she declares what is to happen to him, shows that she does not have much power over him. The positioning of both of the actors also supports which character is more dominant than the other, as Silver is higher up, as well as the low angle shots that show he is still able to manipulate Em into doing what he wants. Em is lower down than Silver because of the position she has been put into and the high angle shots. Finally, I looked at gender in Romeo and Juliet through the clothing that Juliet wears and the fish tank scene at the masked ball. Women in Romeo and Juliet are even more oppressed than the ones in Skyfall. Juliet is often protected by the people around her to make her pure and innocent, which is shown by her dress in the ballroom scene, as she is a white angel. Catherine Belsey supports this by saying, Juliet's white fancy dress emphasises her innocence. She is both the bright angel and the snowy dove of Shakespeare's text. However, Romeo and Juliet are both more sexually aware, which we also find out more in the ballroom scene in the bathroom. This is shown through the soundtrack of the film, as both Romeo and Juliet are staring at each other through the fish tank as the romantic music plays. Romeo also objectifies Juliet through the fish tank scene as he stares at her. This links to Laura Mulvey's male gaze theory because she says that the audience is often put into a male's point of view. However, the camera doesn't do a panning shot of up and down Juliet's body, but her neck is exposed and the front of her dress is quite low. This shows that Juliet is oppressed and objectified by men, even though she tries not to be throughout the whole of the film, such as defying her father. Films in the 90s were more sympathetic towards women, rather than making them objects. In conclusion, class is shown clearly through clothing in both Romeo and Juliet and Skyfall. This is through the expensive black clothing M and Bond wear compared with Silver's prison costume and suit. Also, black symbolises power in Romeo and Juliet, as Capulets wear black in the beginning scene compared with the brightly coloured shirts that the Montagues wear. Women in both films are shown as weak and that they are unable to be in charge, which is clearly shown in Skyfall in the conversation between M and Silver. The position of the camera also supports this in this scene. In Romeo and Juliet, Juliet is shown as innocent and as an angel. She is also seen as defiant, and she goes against her father, which is not common in films in the 1990s.